To chief or not to chief? That is the question. Well, at least it was the question before Thursday afternoon when the Wellington Phoenix announced a contract extension for the man that led them to their best ever A-League season in the 2023-24 campaign. The tides have most definitely turned in the 12 months that have followed. There's clearly enough credit in the bank to pay the bills. For now. What has Chiefy learnt in a difficult season, and what will change for the next? Meanwhile, the Bulls are launching legal action against Football Australia itself. So much for finally a quiet off-season in Macarthur. Brisbane sink Adelaide's finals hopes even further. Could Sydney's men's team make the move to Leichhardt Oval? And if Cristiano Ronaldo wants to win a Champions League on a different continent, he'll have to get past an Australian player to do so. On this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast, my name is not Lachlan Avil. Of course, it is Jacob Stevens taking over hosting duties today because Lachie is not feeling 100%. But he is here with us. Lachie, how you doing?
Yeah, all right. Thanks, Jacob. Wasn't included in the travelling squad during the week, but a few other injuries and unavailabilities meant that had to come in late notice. So I'm just looking for little 15 minutes off the bench and then head back home to bed, I think.
That's right. Late call up. I think it's going to be myself and the other amazing guest we have on tonight, Poletti, who are going to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting. Poletti, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. So to take the listeners a little inside baseball here, this is the second time this season that Jacob Stevens has taken over hosting duties for either myself or Lachie, and it's also the second time this season he has read out an intro that he did not write. I wrote his intro for the Dubcast, and Lachie wrote the intro for tonight.
And if I might
Jacob,
make one more small clarification just on the intro as well. Jacob went a little bit off script and said that Ronaldo would have to get an Aussie player to win a Champions League. It's actually an Aussie coach. So just stick to the script next time.
Stick to the script next time.
Yeah,
look,
learner.
What can I say? It's 9:30 here. It's been a long day.
I mean, all I've learned from this is that Jacob needs to start writing his own intros, clearly.
That sounds like too much effort, especially on a last-minute call to make me host. So we'll lead off with today's episode, of course, with the recent news. Giancarlo Italiano, he will be back with the Wellington Phoenix for next season for the 2025-26 campaign. It's a one-year deal confirmed with a one-year option. Unlike some of the communications with some other coaches in the league, we know for sure there is an option on this one. It's not 2 straight years. Seems like, for the most part, there's been mixed reactions from a lot of people regarding this one. But here's what Chiefy had to say after the news was announced and what has to change for him ahead of next season.
Having a fit squad will, be a big start. I think that you saw at the beginning of the year when we had a full squad and almost close to full contingent, we're very competitive. And then also make some additions to the squad and add to the attacking quality that we have and hopefully that should solidify us. Last year's success, I remember at the beginning of the season, everyone wrote us off. There are people in this room that said that we'll come dead last. We were able to hit heights that no one thought that we could. This season, probably the expectation was a lot higher, but I think also people need to understand that, when you have a lot of turnover of players and so on, it's going to affect consistency, playing style and so on. So for me, it's getting back to those things and making sure that we can turn over performance and then the rest will work itself out. The great thing about this season is just giving me the ability to see things that I didn't see in my first year. So now I know how to prepare. Now I know how important it is to have a plan B, plan C in terms of player availability and so on. I think that's for a large part one of the reasons why decided to continue. If I felt as though there wasn't enough resources, I don't think would have been a good fit for either of us. But I feel like there's enough there that we can move forward.
Now, obviously, there's a few things he mentions there, 3 or 4 different things, but one that he keeps coming back to is player availability, not having a full squad throughout the season, whether it's through injury. Obviously, Marco Rojas coming in as sort of their big signing, being injured a lot of the time. Alex Rufer, a real leader in the squad, the veteran, the person they're going to look to for a lot of performances. He was injured at times throughout the season. And then, of course, a big turnover from last season as well with the success that they had. A lot of players heading overseas into other clubs within the A-League, the likes of Paulson, Old, Sermon, Kryev. It's a long list of players that left them, Lockie. But does it also not kind of feel like sometimes it's too much of an excuse to be able to use that? Or do you think that genuinely player availability for the Knicks this year, that is a big reason why they weren't so successful?
I think it is a big reason. And I think we all look at kind of injuries and player availability a little bit differently week to week as we do season to season. It's easy to say over a season, you look at all those names that have left and the injuries that they've had throughout the season, and it's actually quite understandable to see, why they're so far down the table compared to where they were last season. But then week to week, obviously, we can't just talk every episode about the injuries they have. We've got to talk about other things as well. So we come up with different reasons, and maybe kind of in the attempt to do that, we drift away from what the core issues of the Wellington Phoenix might have been this year. So, yeah, look, it's definitely been an issue. There's several names on the departure list that you didn't even mention then. That it adds up to like 8 or 9 really significant players, and then Chiefy clearly talked about the idea that Marco Rojas being such a crucial player that he was supposed to have been relied on this season, and learning the value of having a plan B and a plan C in terms of player availability as well. No one really kind of fit the mold like Marco did when he was out. Despite only having played a few games, he's still right up there on the assist chart for the team this season. So that just goes to show how crucial a player like him can be. But yeah, you got to have plan B and plan C, and that's kind of on the field where Chiefy's mistake was this season, I think.
Well, and that's the other thing, right, is that he's making mistakes this season. But I think we've all got to kind of take a step back and remember he's only a second-year head coach, right? Like, the success that he had in the first season, I think maybe sort of papered over the fact that that's his first ever time as a senior head coach in football. So he didn't have those opportunities. It's something he admitted to there in that little clip, that he didn't have those mistakes in that first year because things went so smoothly. And so now it's almost sort of backfiring on him here in the second year, Poletti. It does seem like he's taking it in his stride. He's using this as a learning opportunity. Do you think that's also why the club, perhaps were more than happy to extend him, knowing that, he's not necessarily had that chance to have that growth in his first season? He's having it now. It's clear it's a learning opportunity. We know that for a fact, and we know he's going to be stronger next year.
I think that everything you said is true. I also think that the Wellington Phoenix looked at this and thought, we can't afford to lose another coach to another A-League men's side. They lost Marco Rudan to Western United. They lost Ufitale to Sydney FC, who did say he was leaving the club for an overseas opportunity. He just didn't specify where overseas that opportunity was. But, could they really afford to lose Chiefy to the likes of an Adelaide United, who we know are looking for a new coach? And I know, Jacob, you would have been very, very happy, having to attend Chiefy presses week in, week out. You probably would have just spent 40 minutes talking about tactics before you even started actually, doing the press conference itself. But so I think that was part of the thought process from the club. I think the resourcing idea as well played a lot into it. I was having this discussion today on Blue Sky with Daniel Fimpasane, who's a huge Wellington fan. Look, my dream is for both Wellington Phoenix teams to become the NPL New South Wales All-Stars in the A-Leagues, because look, NPL New South Wales not free, yes, but there's a lot of talent there, and one name I did mention from RPL Leichhardt, Saya Kambayashi, I think he would fit very well into a Chiefy sort of system. And so I like the idea of, I don't know if Moneyball is the right term here, but I very much like the idea of, splashing big, getting some big names in for Wellington, but then also, finding these little gems from the NPL that, could get the Knicks to the promised land next season.
Well, and that's going to be the big thing, right? Moving on from this is going to be that recruitment aspect, because I sort of see this in a similar vein to the Aloisi extension where Western United, Aloisi's led them to the championship. He has a lean couple of years, but they know the quality that he has as a coach. So they extend him and then they give him an opportunity to continue to build and develop the squad. In the off-season, they signed some key players. We knew that goal scoring was a problem for them last year, so they bring in proven goal scorer Hiroshi Ibasuki, who's, in the Golden Boot race. They have Noah Botic as well, talented up-and-comer who's been getting minutes. He's also in the Golden Boot race. They make the signings of players like Angus Thurgate in the middle, who provides a lot of experience and quality. It seems like Phoenix are kind of poised to do the same thing, but based on what we saw last off-season, that's not necessarily going to be the case. And I like you bringing up that Moneyball thing there, Poletti, because there's a part of me that almost feels like the Knicks could turn heel in a way and become sort of an Australian team in New Zealand, right? Kind of what you mentioned with the NPL New South Wales All-Stars, because of course, the New Zealand football talent pool is already incredibly small and incredibly limited, and it seems like Auckland have done their best to tap into that and extract the most out of it that they can. It almost feels like it would be a one-up to just go, well, okay, then you can do that, but we're just going to go, to Australia and grab the next best lot. But Lockie, moving into next season, do you get the feeling that there is actually going to be a shift from the Knicks in regards to recruitment? Because it does feel like they very much relied on internal sort of recruitment in a way, in terms of developing players and bringing them up. They've always had a decent and decently strong youth academy in that sense, but they've also let players mature at the club and spend a lot of time there. Do you think that this is the off season now, with it sort of almost all on the line, an all or nothing bet, to go out there and try and grab some quality experienced players and see if that helps make the difference?
I think there will be definitely a couple of key pieces added as well. Chiefy noted, a desire for a creative player in midfield and probably some additions to the defence as well. Another point he brought up was with the visa players is that a lot of them usually take a season to kind of just embed themselves in the league, and usually, that second season they kind of kick on. One of the guys from your neck of the woods, Zach Clough, is a brilliant example of that. Was really slow, and then after 10 games or something in his second season was leading the assist chart for the league. So we've seen that happen before. So you're seeing the likes of Hideki Ishige, who has 8 assists on the season. That's pretty good for a single season effort for the Knicks. That's right up there in terms of their all-time records. Kazuki Nagasawa as well, and then Francisco Giraldes that came in late and made a pretty good impact until he got injured as well. All those guys will now be in for the start of pre-season. They will have had a little bit of time under Chiefy at the Wellington Phoenix. You got a lot of kind of under 20, under 21 players that have, had a lot of league football where they probably wouldn't have if a lot of those other names we talked about hadn't left the club. So I don't think there's going to be a massive overturn in the squad that we see from this season compared to the next one. There will be a couple of key additions, and as Chiefy said, he's been assured that he has the resources to go out and do that. But I think the undervalued part will just be the extra year of consistency with relatively the same squad, which kind of goes back to the argument that a lot of what really kind of killed them this year, plus the injuries and maybe some tactical naivety, was just the massive squad overhaul and having to start from zero again with, let's face it, worse and inexperienced players. That's quite a hard thing to do.
For sure. And I mentioned earlier, of course, there's an option in this contract. It's a 1+1, which gets us all wondering, what's the KPIs here? Is there a certain point that is going to tip it in his favour and give him that extra year versus not being enough to meet it? So I'd like to hear from both of you. Poletti, I'll go to you first. What do you reckon is a pass mark in that regard, and that's going to trigger the club to activate that extra year on his contract?
Avoiding travelling to Darwin.
You think just that? You think
no?
That's
the joke answer. That's the joke answer.
Good. I was going to say, because that's crazy low bar.
No, look, the serious answer is I think at least finals. I'm just trying to decide whether elimination final exit is enough. So like just qualifying for the finals, or does he have to make a semi-final and be competitive in those two legs like they were last season? Where they were within, what was it, like, a few minutes of making the grand final. Like, I think, to me, think making the semi-finals and being competitive would have to be the pass mark, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's, well, okay, we made the elimination final, bad red card in the first 20 minutes, make it to penalties, go out on penalties, like park the bus sort of performance, and it's just like, look, we tried. Or, is it simply they make the elimination finals with another injury-filled season like they had this year, and it's like, well, okay, that's 2 bad luck years in a row on the injury front. Let's give you a third year. Let's see if you can actually fix it, and then if you can't fix it, well, then end your contract. See you later. Probably very similarly to what they did with Paul Temple this year on the A-League women's side of things, where his contract came up, didn't make finals, and it's like, we're going to go in a different direction. We're not offering you a new contract. And if you want to see where I think that different direction is going to go on the A-League women's front, you can head to the roundballaustralia.com.au right now, because I think they're going to go towards Bev Friesman.
There you go. Lockie, do you think it's as black and white as that? It's going to be an objective results-based thing, or do you think the club might even take a more holistic approach and say, well, look, we can see what you're trying to do, development of X, Y, and Z, this is going well, we're bringing in young players that are having an impact, and, you're doing this well and that well, and we can see clear progression? Or do you think it is just going to be a case of you make finals or you're out?
Yeah, I don't think it will be that black and white. I think there's definitely a world where they could miss finals next season and you could still get that option taken up. Because remember, it's going to be, on the terms that they've agreed now, whatever money it is, and that kind of thing, right? So it's a different bar to kind of just offering him a new contract because it's just that 1 year. So I think it's lower than making finals, clear cut. I think the key KPIs that they'll be looking for is the progress on this season in a couple of different areas. David Dome, who's the general manager of the Phoenix, he spoke to the media about a week and a half ago, I think, and he said that Chiefy had presented to the board and kind of laid out, I guess, his perspective on how this season played out, what the issues were, and the lessons that he's learnt. Obviously, things have to change in terms of how they're going about managing their players. And, for example, putting all their eggs in the Marco Rojas basket. That was a naive thing of them to do. So having those plans and having redundancies for when things go wrong and knowing how they're going to shift in key moments, as long as he can prove that he's doing that, and also that the consistent squad is making progress, winning more games, absolutely. 11th won't be enough. You're going to have to get probably 7th or 8th. That competition for finals is absolutely the minimum of where they want to be. But if he can get 8th, maybe, and show that he's made progress and actually, taken action on those lessons that, he's had to learn the tough way this year, I think he'll be all right for that extra 1 year.
And I like the word you used there, naive, because I think that's a word that quite nicely and succinctly sums up the Knicks season so far. It's just been naivety. Obviously, young, inexperienced coach, relatively young, inexperienced squad, and what looked to be some, naive moves from the footballing department as well.
Yeah, and it's not like a bad thing, right? As you say, it's just a new coach who doesn't know what he doesn't know. And I'm not saying we know it either, far from it. It's the fact that you have to go through and learn these lessons the hard way. You can read books as much as you want. Chiefy in another interview this year was saying you can have all the good sessions and the tactical approaches you want, but if you don't have the real kind of togetherness in the group moving forward in one direction, then it's all useless. So that's another thing he's learned this year, and hopefully you'll put him in good stead.
Well, I think I speak for all of us when I say I'm glad to see that he'll still be around in the A-League. His press conference is always just so insightful, and it's nice and refreshing to have somebody so open, especially when it comes to game plans and tactics. So, look, it's, as I said, been divisive for Phoenix supporters, but I think with a coach like him, he shows that he knows what he's talking about a lot of the time. He's just maybe not quite had all the pieces there this season, so it's a chance next season to prove all the doubters wrong and get some results again. Sticking in the A-League for now, look, there's never a normal week or day or minute or second in Australian football. And no club has exemplified that more this season than MacArthur. whether it be on the field or off the field.
The last 3 years.
Since they came into the competition, realistically, it has been just one hell of a ride for them. And this is the latest little moment on the roller coaster for them, as it's been confirmed that the club are taking Football Australia to court. That's correct, yes. They are suing Football Australia. This report comes from AAP's George Clark. The Bulls are claiming that Football Australia misled club owners when they applied for entry into the A-League. Now, of course, back then in 2018, when this process was going on, of course, Football Australia were still in charge of the A-League and still in charge of the expansion, so it's separate to the APL. The Bulls claim that they breached consumer law and adopted unfair tactics during the expansion process, and the first appearance in court is on Tuesday. This circled back to the broadcasting deal with Foxtel, right? This was coming about right at the end of that broadcasting deal with Foxtel. And from the understanding that the George Clark has of it is that the FA made certain promises, assurances to the Bulls owners that they would be given a minimum level of distributions of $1.2 million a year. It was said to be that the level was supposed to be at 3.25, but an absolute minimum of 1.2 per year. Obviously, as we know recently, distributions have not been anywhere close to those sorts of figures. And so the club, for the last, I believe it's been about 5 years now that they've sort of been looking into this, MacArthur. They're not happy. They've been seeking remedy for this. They are saying that at the time that this deal went through for expansion for MacArthur, that the FA knew that the deal with Foxtel was coming to an end and that they were probably not going to get as favourable terms in with the next broadcasting rights deal, and that they wouldn't be able to meet these obligations for distributions. Now, Poletti, I see you shaking your head vehemently there. What's your take on all this? Because it's your neck of the woods, and it seems like it's all gone down there in southwest Sydney again.
I mean, where do you want me to start with this? Like, give me a starting point. Because
okay, I'll give you a starting point.
Lockie's got
I'll give you one. I think, from my understanding of this, the key issue that the Bulls are arguing is that the $12 million license fee price that they were asked to pay was justified by the promise of central distributions, right? And that their argument is that, that Football Australia used those kind of 3.25 numbers, whatever, to justify the $12 million license fee, already knowing that the distributions were likely to fall off the back of the broadcast deal falling away. There's your starting point.
Right. So, like a wrestling fan, when they see deodorant in a shop, I'm not buying that. I don't buy that. For
That's a weird drive-by.
That's just what did wrestling fans ever do to you?
If you understand the reference, you'll understand the reference. Now,
and if you don't, it's just mean.
Look, and I say that as someone who loves wrestling. Okay. Now, I don't buy that for a second. So, if we take that argument at face value, this process started 2018-ish, right? So that was year 1, year 2 of this 6-year, $300 million Foxtel broadcast deal. So that was really early into a 6-year deal when this process started. So I would have no reason to doubt the FA would have believed that those numbers to be sincere. And obviously we know that Foxtel wanted another team in Sydney and they wanted another team in Melbourne, and they got their wish. And then COVID hit, and suddenly they wanted to bail. And they didn't send money to the FA for part of the rights deal. If memory serves me correctly, that was somewhere in the vicinity of $12 million that triggered the renegotiation for a 1-year deal until a new rights deal could be negotiated, which we now know is 10 and Paramount Plus CBS. So, and that was halfway through the 6-year deal. So we got from the start of the deal to COVID, which is when Foxtel decided they wanted to bail. Why would the FA set a price if they knew 1 year into the deal that Foxtel wanted out? They would have. You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't give in to the demands of Foxtel for another team in Melbourne and another team in Sydney if that were the case. If you knew Foxtel wanted out of the deal 1 year in, you would have found a way to put in different teams, whether that be Wollongong, Tasmania, Canberra, those sorts of things. Like, we know there were plenty of bids going around at that time wanting to enter the A-League, where there aren't necessarily as many now, but, we know there were a number of different, bidding groups that wanted in. And so, yeah, I read this article and I just looked at it and I can't buy the argument here that, and yeah, I can't buy the argument to that particular point. And there's plenty more I can talk about on this because it's just so many frustrations for me coming out of the club here. And actually, if you'll allow me to continue, I want to talk here about this centre of excellence that they've been supposedly trying to build for the last 4 years, because it stems from this argument as well, is that they've apparently been trying to settle this peacefully with the FA for the last 5 years. But then why would you go buy a 60-something acre plot of land in Camden, which wouldn't have been cheap, if you apparently didn't have any money and you had to borrow $5 million to keep the books afloat? Why would you go and buy a 65-acre plot of land that right now is still farmland? I've been out there in the last couple of months. There are still cows on that land. That not a shovel has taken a step into the ground. I will. So that was in 2021 when they purchased it. You then go to 2023, so almost 2 years later. MacArthur FC welcomes a funding commitment of $12.5 million from the Liberal and National government to fund the construction of the Bulls High Performance and Community Sporting Precinct in Camden. Basically, if re-elected on March 25, the New South Wales government will provide $12.5 million towards the Centre of Excellence. You then go forward to this year, and it's $7.5 million commitment for MacArthur FC Regional Sports Facility, once again tied to Liberal government, being nominated or being voted in at a national level. Not to turn this into a politics podcast, but this
I
is
think
now,
you just have done.
but this would be successive election campaigns, one state, one federal level, where MacArthur have tied themselves to a Liberal government getting elected at a time when the Liberal government is, probably as unpopular as they've ever been in a lot of aspects across communities. So it doesn't seem like this is going to end well. And then if you go to their website, when you look at the Bulls FC Academy page of it, it's MacArthur FC is in advanced planning to build its Centre of Excellence in Cawdor. They've been in advanced planning for the last 4 years.
I think you've kind of got to two points here, right? So one of them is, this argument that the FA wouldn't have made, such an agreement knowing that Foxtel aren't going to, be coming back to the party. They're not going to be having the money. Obviously, you can't plan for something like COVID that, realistically it came out of nowhere. I remember I was on holiday 2019, 2020, that December, January. And I remember, just sort of like on the way out reading about, there's a virus going around in parts of Asia, and coming home and it just being like complete anarchy and everyone's in a full panic mode about it. So that kind of came out of nowhere. Nobody can expect that. But yeah, this idea that, you can't buy the argument that they didn't know. I think what MacArthur are trying to say, at least from my understanding of this, is that them putting in that minimum level was them acknowledging the fact that they knew that things might not be as good in the next broadcasting rights cycle. Perhaps didn't quite calculate how not good it would be, but that seems to be the crux of MacArthur's argument. And then as to, the whole Centre of Excellence thing, I think that comes from there's long-term planning and strategies in place at these clubs. And for them to be able to progress seriously as a football club, they need that. They have, a mutual understanding and expectation. They're going to be receiving a set amount of money, and you can't get anything done in this country without government funding. So, while it sucks that it hasn't necessarily come about, and they've perhaps tied themselves to what's going to be a losing party at the election. It's, you know, you can kind of understand it from that perspective. But yeah, Lockie, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on you know, sort of the FA's approach to this, because I think that's what's going to be under scrutiny here the most, is not that people shouldn't be surprised that the Bulls are upset about this, right? I mean, if you're promised a certain amount of money and it's not delivered, pretty reasonable you're going to be upset about it and look for it. But yeah, I think what really is under scrutiny here is how the FA have acted in this manner. And obviously we don't know all the facts, and it's still got to go to trial and all of that, where we will find out more. But it seems like, at least on face value, that they were anticipating things might not be great, but they didn't quite, you know, give themselves enough leeway in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, that's one way to look at it. The other way is they're just protecting themselves in case things go down, right? And I don't think we can really say too much on which way it is until we learn more, as you say, through the court case. Personally, and this is just my opinion, I probably lean towards Poletti's view that it would just seem odd for Football Australia to do this. Well, from what we know about the expansion process, it was actually quite competitive. It's not like the Bulls were in some massive position of power where Football Australia were desperate to get them in. Obviously, we know that Sydney was one of the areas, but there were multiple bids in the kind of greater Sydney or at least New South Wales region. Macarthur were not this kind of almighty power that FA had to bend towards. So it, on the face of it, yeah, it seems odd. But if there is something in that license agreement about absolutely being a minimum level, well, then that's in the contract. It would have seemed odd that that hadn't been sorted out by now, and it would have taken this long to get there. But it is, if it is some question of, you know, an email chain that's going around saying, oh, just so you know, because the Foxtel deal might not get renewed, we're going to have to put this in, well, then that leads to something. But that's pure speculation at this point. So, look, the Bulls have not managed to keep themselves out of controversy since they have, you know, existed as a football club, and it seems that they're quite keen to stay in that position in the news cycle.
Well, if for nothing else, they at least give us stuff to talk about routinely on these episodes. When
just,
we usually
just once, though, I would like it not. Like, I would just like a normal episode.
Just normal,
just once.
yeah.
Like, just we don't have any sort of controversy to talk about.
Well, this morning, all it was going to be was, you know, Jacob Brissett coming back from an offside position. All of a sudden, we've got Chiefy staying on, and then the Bulls suing Football Australia. It all kicked off.
Yeah, but Chiefy staying on is a normal story.
Yeah.
I guess so. It's still newsworthy, you know. That's why we spoke
about
it.
But that's what I mean. Like, it's a
Still rare,
normal
though.
story. It's
Yeah.
not. It's not. Let's, you know, spend 15 minutes talking about a court case involving Macarthur, because that seems to be the norm.
Well, yeah, maybe it's time for Macarthur to, yeah, quite rightly, let somebody else take the spotlight for a while, because it seems to be going from bad to worse for them. But I mean, look, it's a late week episode, and yet we do actually have some football to talk about, some A-League football to talk about. It's not Asian football, it's A-League football, which makes it, I think, all the more funny that we do have so much else to talk about that isn't related to on-the-field stuff. But of course, Brisbane and Adelaide played each other midweek, and Adelaide heading into this game away from home, they're right on the cusp of finals, right? They'd fallen out of it, and Colviet was saying in the build-up to the game against Wellington, we win these next three, and it's basically we're in, right? Obviously, they will be reliant on some results that Sydney get, but they've done everything they can. They head to Brisbane with this attitude of, we need to win a game, and then they go out and draw 1-1 with arguably one of the worst sides in league history. Granted, Brisbane did get a result, and a very good result, against Western United in round, 26, but it still felt like, Poletti, for a team with finals aspirations, Adelaide really kind of showed that maybe they don't actually deserve it this season with the way that they played.
I mean, have Adelaide not been showing all season? Okay, no, sorry.
First
That
10
would
weeks.
that would be harsh.
I
think about the halfway mark of the season, it really started to drop off. I think, from memory, you've talked about it before on here. I don't think it's any coincidence that it was in line with Mark Milligan's departure. So, you know, maybe maybe they should have moved on from Calviet and said to Milligan, hey, maybe don't go to the Malaysian.
Just as a quick aside,
we'll get rid of Carl.
Wouldn't it be like?
We'll get rid of Carl right now.
Wouldn't it be hilarious if, like, Adelaide doing so poorly was like part of Milligan's CV, like a part applying for the Newcastle job or something?
Like look at the results after I left. Yeah. I mean,
it's just like, well, yeah, like maybe it's just like maybe they should have got rid of Carl 6 months ago, and it's just like go to Milligan. Yeah, maybe don't go to Malaysia. We'll give you your job here. Don't worry.
I mean, it'll certainly be a boost for him as he looks for his next job, Milligan. And obviously the rumours still persist that he'll be headed to the Jets. So yeah, maybe you're right, Lockie. It might have been a little boost, the cherry on top to everything else that he's achieved in his career to go, hey, look, we were actually doing fine. We were top of the table when I left. So, the problems aren't on me.
Yeah. I'm not sure if we reported on this either as well, but the Malaysian national team did actually confirm that he's leaving. For another opportunity. So obviously we haven't heard anything from the Newcastle side yet, but he is definitely leaving Malaysia.
Yeah. So, as to what side it is, like I said, we've all heard the rumours of it being the Jets. I haven't actually seen him connected with anywhere else at this point in time either. So we'll have to wait and see for that. But it certainly seems like at the moment it's leading.
Sorry, this is just hitting me in this moment. But given what we know about Carl Viet now, it feels like those discussions internally at Adelaide United were held before any of these rumours about Mark Milligan. I just wonder if that conversation was already being had. I don't know.
And you think that maybe it was just all a show, and they're just going to bring him back?
Not a show, but maybe somewhere between him leaving for Malaysia and the decision that they were going to get rid of Carl, maybe they went, oh, actually, maybe we have made a little bit of a mistake here. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me because everybody that talks about him seems to mention him in high regard, Mark Milligan, as a coach. Obviously, he was a fantastic player and we all know the quality he had on the pitch, but it seems like when he's on the sideline as well, a lot of players really appreciate the work that he does, and a lot of experts seem to suggest that he's going to be one of the next great Australian coaches. So it wouldn't surprise me if they sort of perhaps reconsidered their position when that did happen. And like you said, as they're having those discussions with Carl about his future, they kept one eye on Milligan, thinking, well, he already knows the club, he knows the players, it's going to be a big boost for them. But let's talk about the game that happened on the pitch, because while it was a 1-1 draw, I think honestly that Brisbane, they kind of deserved to win with the way that they played. Lockie, obviously they missed a number of chances. Berengay, I don't know what that was about, how he managed to miss that one, got right underneath it. Abubakar, he was offside. Jacob Brissett, you mentioned earlier, just barely. And look, I've not actually seen a clear replay or still or anything of the offside, but I've seen people saying that it's literally millimeters.
I'm not convinced.
You're not convinced?
No. I look, I know I had a go at Andy Harper earlier on the season for talking about this too much, but it is genuinely one of these scenarios where not only because of the camera angle limitations we have at A-League rounds, it kind of looks like it could be even anyway, but it really depends on which frame you freeze this on as to whether he looks offside or not. And I reckon it could be on. I reckon it could be close. Obviously, we could launch into the whole VAR debate if we wanted to. I don't particularly feel like that's an angle I want to go down tonight, because mainly I just feel like it goes to the dramatic and tragedy of Adelaide United's season, right? And the irony of it all, having all those three chances, go in the back of the net, or in Berengay's case, not, but probably should have all been goals. And then you have the one, that Abubakar just, lets off from distance. And to be fair to him, I think he's been really great since he's come in. Yeah. But this is not one of the goals that he should be celebrated for too much. This is a massive error from Max Vituli. I don't know how much in particular it bounced off the really terrible Suncorp pitch, but just Adelaide, their own worst enemies again. But I do think we have to give some credit to Brisbane. To be fair, I'll be the first to admit, kind of tuned out of their season a little bit, probably a month or so ago. So I don't know how real this is, but it feels like they have been making some improvements. Obviously, at least they've shown that on the results. But it's good to see them actually putting together some results. Back in earlier in the season, when I said they were going to come around, Turns out it was just going to be the last month of the season, but
The
they
last
have got
3
there.
games.
So good on Brisbane for that. But yeah, just the tragedy of Adelaide's season continues here.
Yeah, and that goal that Abubakar scored from outside the box, the goalkeeper does have to do a lot better in that situation, and it's just another example to add to the long list this season across the A-League of, goalkeepers making those little mistakes that really cost their team. And for Max Bartuli, they don't come much bigger than that, right? A goal that could potentially cost your team finals in, just what is it, his second or third game, I think, between the sticks for the Reds in a season where it seems like it doesn't matter who they put there, there's going to be a mistake and they're going to concede one way or another. It does actually kind of remind me, when I saw it live, immediately had flashbacks to Nestori Irankunda's goal against Victory last season, where it was a kind of similar hit. It took kind of a bobble or had a bit of dip on it, and it was Paul Izzo between the sticks for Victory in that game. It was a much more well hit ball, and it was in the corner, and it was perhaps a little bit more of a difficult save in the first place, but Izzo managed to get his hands to it and it just sort of bobbled through. Kind of similar vibes here with this one. And honestly, Abubakar is a player who he was getting a lot of hate after his first few games. People were like, we can't see what he offers on the pitch. Why is he here? And I think that, kind of like Brisbane have done and Zadkovic has done, has responded quite well to that criticism. And in the last few games, he's been the real difference maker for Brisbane. I think, what is it now? He's got 4 assists or something and a goal over his last few games. He's been a tremendous asset for that Brisbane side. And then on the Adelaide side of things, Poletti, this is making their finals prospects very, very difficult right now. They're outside the 6 on goal difference. Sydney have a game in hand. Obviously, Adelaide have the bye on the final round of the season. Actually, interesting little fact about that. Adelaide had a bye on the first round of the season as well. So technically played the shortest season of any A-League side this season. I'm yet to see that hurled out as an excuse for their performances so far. Oh, we didn't have as much, rest over the course of a season, but I'm sure it will come at some point. Somebody will bring it up. Well, I just didn't I? So there you go.
Well done.
But no, it's looking much more difficult for the Reds now, Poletti, and it's not going to be any easier for them with City up next on the weekend.
I mean, Brisbane just low-key playing spoiler to everyone's seasons here. I mean, they beat Western United, ruining their shot at Champions League football for next season. They're holding Adelaide to a draw, on a poor surface in a midweek game because Suncorp Stadium decided they wanted a concert in January instead. So, yeah, for Adelaide, it's Sydney's 6th place spot to lose at this point. If anyone else makes it into the top 6, it will be because Sydney lose it rather than any of the other 2 sides, Adelaide and Macarthur, have done anything to win it. Because all Sydney really need to do, if I've done the math right, they just need to get 2 points. That's all they have to do.
Yeah.
Because they're on 37 as well, I believe. So literally all they need to do is draw both their games. Because I can't see Macarthur winning both of their games by a large enough margin to overcome the goal difference.
Adelaide could still win and go 3 points, so that they could need 3, Sydney.
They could, yeah, but
Poletti's just saying Adelaide aren't beating City.
Well, yeah, do you think? Okay, Lockie, do you think Adelaide are beating City?
I don't think it's the probable outcome, but I think Sydney should, not bank on that not happening.
And I'm not saying Sydney would bank on that not happening. I think Sydney will very much enjoy their trip down to Tarney this weekend. And I mean, the Western United do seem to be on a little bit of a downslide at the moment, and I think Sydney are primed for the picking and will render every argument moot by the end of the weekend, because I think Sydney will seal their top 6 spot regardless of what happens in the other games. I think the points tally, I think the goal difference will just because essentially Adelaide, they're outside on goal difference already. They would have to thump.
Isn't it like 13 or 14?
If Sydney win,
14 goals. Yeah.
So basically, if Sydney win, then they've sealed up the top 6 spot, because regardless of what because there's no way Adelaide's winning like 15.
But mathematically,
right?
Poletti, it is still possible.
What? So you think that? Okay, so it's a crazy hypothetical scenario. Sydney win 2-1. They extend that goal difference to like 14 or 15. Adelaide beat City 7-0, and then Sydney lose 8-0 the week after.
Well, I mean, Vidmar is an Adelaide boy, so he might just do it. Maybe he thinks that it might lead to a more favourable matchup in the finals, where they match up better against Adelaide than Sydney in the finals. So, conceding 14 on the night,
he might be finally trying.
Season.
He might be finally trying to make amends for calling Adelaide a piss.
All those years later. Well, while we're talking about the weekend, why don't we move on to our weekend look? It's back. We didn't do it last weekend, but it is back now. We're going to start off with the burning questions. Lockie, what's your one?
My burning question is, can Western United stabilise ahead of the final series? They've obviously come off the back of 2 tough defeats. The Wanderers won, I think they were well in the game, but to lose to Brisbane is a bit of the kick in the teeth for them, especially as you want to be playing your best football coming into finals. And, they have a very tough end to their season as well. They have to play Sydney FC this week, who, might be a slightly softer target than what we might have anticipated about a month ago. But then it's obviously Auckland in the final round as well. So those are still 2 teams that we think are playing finals. That's going to be tough games. And if you drop even one of those, then you're at absolute best 3 losses in your last 4 games heading into a what I think will be a crunch elimination final. I think Melbourne City have pretty much locked up the second spot for that Asian Champions League elite and the bye into the second week. So it's really crucial that Western United get a good performance here just to steady themselves, because they've had a good season. They wouldn't want to throw it away just by a poor end to the regular season.
And it is a loss to Brisbane is one of those results as well that it does kind of feel like it could derail things, right? Like, it can throw your mental completely off, because you go in thinking, well, we're going to grab the 3 points here, secure our spot, we're going to be nice and happy, and then it doesn't happen, and all of a sudden panic mode. But I think John Aloisi is, a smart enough and capable enough head coach to be able to keep them all in line, but it will be interesting to see. Poletti, what's your burning question?
My burning question is, can we just have a normal weekend in the A-League, man? Please. I just want a normal weekend. Like, I don't want any more stories dropping about crazy stuff happening. I don't want to hear a coach has been sacked on Sunday morning. I don't want any. I just want a normal weekend of A-League men football where I can just tune in and essentially tune out, that I don't have to pay too much attention to anything. On the A-League women's side, completely different story. It's the elimination final, so give me all of the chaos in those games, please. But on the men's side, just a normal weekend, please. That's all I want.
Is that even possible? I don't know.
It's A-League, man, so no.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
I can hope, right? I can pray.
And pray you might have to. My one, just before we head on, can Adelaide keep their finals hopes alive? We spoke about them just a little bit before there. Obviously, if they do win against City, it's not completely unfound that they could make finals if Sydney stumble. Obviously, a draw with Brisbane hasn't made things easy for them, but the hopes are still alive. There is still technically something for these players to be playing for come the final round of the season for Adelaide. So I'm expecting them to put in an effort and put in a show, and I think if they don't, it maybe speaks a lot of volume as to the environment that's going on at the club at the moment. We're going to move on now to our worst case scenarios. Lockie, I want to hear yours, because I think we've got some kind of similar ones here.
Well, yeah, so they do lead on from each other, but my worst case scenario is that Perth win against Auckland and they can't lift the trophy despite still being like 11 goal difference and 3 points ahead of Melbourne City at the time. We all know that they're going to win the league, but to not have the opportunity to lift their trophy at their home stadium in front of their own fans on the day they win it would be incredibly disappointing. Or you just say, screw it, we're 10 goals ahead, we're going to lift it anyway, and if we screw it up from here, that's going to look real awkward. I think that would also be pretty fun.
Well, yeah, mine's kind of similar. You said they lead on from each other. Mine is that, yeah, they decide to go ahead with the celebrations, but there is no trophy. As we saw in the A-League Women's, they just decide
League
not
equity.
to
That's all I've ever asked for is equitable treatment across the two leagues. That's all I've ever asked for.
They decide not to send the trophy to Auckland, so they can't have any celebrations anyway. that I think would be pretty funny and a worst case scenario.
Poletti,
sure.
I know you talked about this as well, but I just think it's so poor, by the way, that they're using halftime of the men's game on the weekend at Melbourne City to do the trophy lift for the women. It's just poor. Get the trophy to them so they can celebrate on the day.
So I was not aware of this until this morning. That was something that I don't think was announced when we recorded the Dubcast, which you can tune into as part of the Roundball Australia podcast.
They know.
where Burke and myself spent quite a few minutes talking about this exact situation of the trophy not being in Perth, with a rather passionate discussion about it. I think it's just incredibly poor that they're going to have to they lifted the men's game. I think they did that last year as well.
They did, yeah. That was a little bit different because of the scenarios that were at play. But yeah, I get it.
But I know Sydney FC a couple of years ago. Which year was it? I talked about this on the Dubcast. They won the premiership, and they literally had to do their celebration before their week one final against Melbourne City, and this was while they were still a 14.
That's even worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. So they had to do it before their week one final. It was 1-2, 3-4, 3-4 played off, and then 1-2. So the loser of that got the second chance.
Yeah.
So not quite the straight knockout format that we used to have. And then they almost went on to go lose that game to Melbourne City until Rado Vidicic made one of the most puzzling substitutions I have ever seen him make. And he basically started preparing his side to give them rest for... This was after, knowing they would have the week off before the grand final, had they won. So we wanted to give them some extra rest, and Sydney then went on to win that game 4-2 in extra time. But, it's... got to go through the highs of winning the premiership, and then then we got to do the trophy lift, and we got to look all genuine and happy and whatnot, and get that emotions back up before we've got to go play 90 minutes of football, which ended up being 120 minutes of football. Absolutely poor. So yeah, I would honestly, I'd like to see the trophy not be in New Zealand, just because it would finally show some equalness across the leagues. But of course, we all know that's not going to happen. They'll take the trophy to New Zealand because it's the men's. But that's me being cynical, I guess.
And your worst case scenario isn't actually about trophies, Poletti. It's about something different.
No,
something else that we have a lot of complaints about throughout the season, though.
My worst case scenario is that the pitch in Brisbane for the Raw and the Phoenix will be near unplayable, if not completely unplayable. So you talked about the state of the pitch on Tuesday night in the Raw Adelaide game. And then there was a Brisbane Broncos game there tonight as we record Thursday night. And to say that it was raining would be an understatement. It was bucketing down to the point where the ends of the field started to flood. I haven't seen footage from the game yet, but that's what the description was from the radio broadcast I was listening to before I got home to record this. And that within 5 minutes of the game starting, the pitch had already started to chop up. So I think you look at the fact that there were over 60 points in that game. It was a crazy 80 minutes of football in bucketing down conditions on a pitch that already looked poor. I can see that being the worst case scenario, is that we're going to have the last game of football in Brisbane for this season, and it's going to be on a pitch that is just not suitable for any sport to be played, let alone football. There were only 2,000 or so that turned up on Tuesday night. They get 4,000, and this is going to be the lasting image of the 2025 or 24-25 season, is a shocking pitch with a shocking side. And if you're part of that, why would you want to come back next year?
Well, I'm going to put in the thought that probably the pitch was unplayable on Tuesday night. The resounding image I have from it was, I believe it was Jay O'Shea launched into a sliding tackle at one point in the match and left a trench in the pitch which would put the Western Front to shame, honestly, with the size of it. You could fit an army in it. It was a bit ridiculous. But we're going to move on now to our pings from distance. And Lockie, yours is on that game in particular.
Yeah, no, it is. My pick from distance is that the Brisbane-Wellington game could actually be a bit of fun. I know we've got some other, very important fixtures lined up, particularly on the Sunday with the potential trophy lift or non-trophy lift. Western Sydney, big implications, and City United on the Saturday night. But Brisbane and Wellington, two teams that don't really have anything to play for. I know Wellington kind of want to get out of the bottom four and avoid Darwin if they can, but just Brisbane actually playing some football, Brissett, Abubakar have both been really, really fun the last couple of weeks. Wellington with, Chiefy re-signed last couple of games, a pitch that you can't play Chiefy ball on because if you try to play it along the ground, it's just going to bump up into everything, so you can't play out from the back too much. I reckon it's just going to be a bit of hoofball, and hopefully it's a bit of fun.
Poletti, what's yours?
Mine is that this will be a weekend packed with draws. I looked at the schedule and I'm just like, these games all could be absolute goal fest, but I think it's just all these teams are so evenly matched, whether it be the Brisbane-Wellington game, whether it be the Macarthur Victory game, whether it be the City-Adelaide game, where I just see there's just being a lot of draws this weekend. And I don't know why. I don't think there's going to be a lot of wins this weekend.
It would be quite A-League, wouldn't it, to have all the build-ups to these final couple of games with all these different implications and then just a stalemate across the board and everyone just resumes their positions for next week. But mine is going to go against that idea. I think the Jets are going to get a result over the Wanderers. I reckon they'll beat the Wanderers. They are playing for nothing at this point in time, right? There's a possibility they get caught by one of the bottom four teams and have to go to Darwin, but it's looking quite unlikely with the buffer that they've got. And obviously they're mathematically out of finals. They're in limbo. They got nothing to play for. Why not go out there, have a bit of fun, beat the Wanderers? By all accounts, it's going to be a big crowd there. The Wanderers have sold out their away bay allocation, and the Jets, despite everything that's gone on this season, they've had respectable numbers for the most part. It just seems like it's tailor made for the Jets to go in there and grab a win, and it would really then throw the spanner into the works for the Wanderers season, right? Where all of a sudden they're in a bit of a precarious situation where it looks like, maybe they're solid for top four, but a loss, especially if Victory can get a result, all of a sudden Victory are pushing for top four. If Western can get a result, then, that they're going to move further away from the Wanderers. I like the chaos implications of it. So
just one correction, Jacob. They do have something to play for. And that's the man with the hands who built Australia in the second last game for the Jets. They've galvanised behind him. They're going to put on a good show, I reckon.
To be fair, that is a good point. It is something, playing for pride and playing those last couple of games.
And to avoid a trip to Darwin.
Like I said, it's unlikely, but it's still possible for them. Finals is entirely impossible, so yeah, there's a little bit at stake for them, and I do think that they've been playing some good football of recent as well, so I don't think it's completely beyond reason. Staying in the state of New South Wales now, just quickly touch on Leichhardt Oval. I'm sure many of you have seen that the news that they're going to be getting a massive $40 million makeover at Leichhardt Oval, and despite the name, it's not going to be turned into an actual oval. It's going to remain in its rectangular format, which is great news for everybody. It's actually being paid for collaboratively between the federal, state and local governments. So a bit of work going on there to get everybody on the same page, which is fantastic to see. Of course, Leichhardt Oval being the home of the West Tigers in the NRL. It just seems like it's an interesting thing, right? Because we've seen Sydney FC play there in the past, especially during the redevelopment of the Sydney Football Stadium. They had a few games at Leichhardt, and it seemed like pretty unanimously people enjoyed the experience that they had there. by all accounts and seeing the renders of this proposed redevelopment or makeover rather, Lockie, it looks like it would be a pretty tailor-made experience for a good football atmosphere. So it sort of raises the question of, could it become an option for Sydney FC, for those, not necessarily those marquee fixtures, so, your non-derbies, non-big blues, those sorts of things, where you're not necessarily going to be able to pack out Sydney Football Stadium, but, you get a better atmosphere and the crowd looks a bit better when, you're playing at Leichhardt with sort of that 20,000 capacity. It seems like it's a bit of a better fit. It's still a rectangle. It's not out in the middle of nowhere, which is the complaint with Jubilee, right? It seems like maybe there's an option for Sydney, not to move permanently, of course, but to I suppose come align with what everybody wants, with more boutique stadiums in the area.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something worth considering for sure. Sydney play a lot of their A-League women's games out there, so it's not a venue that is unfamiliar for the club. 20,000 is a really good number for someone like Sydney FC. You can imagine, obviously, you're not moving the derby away from Sydney Football Stadium, but some of those other high, marketable matchups that are probably pushing 20K, if all of a sudden you have a couple of seasons of them getting 4 or 5 different fixtures that are close to that 20,000, then that's the point where the atmosphere is going to be, become part of the selling point, and those fixtures elevate themselves even further, and you get more towards that $20,000 sellout. It is a rectangle, which is good. Yes, you're going to have to share with the NRL, but what else is new? It seems like there are a lot of things that could make this a good idea. I put this out on Twitter and I was asking people, like, what are the issues? What are the clear red flags? The only real one that I can let Poletti touch on a little bit more as well, being a local, is that it's apparently not the easiest stadium to get to, which I'd have sympathy for, just via public transport and parking around the area. Obviously, the Brisbane Roar had similar troubles when they moved up, but it feels like a different situation. That was like so far away. It seemed like a bit of a different issue. So I'm wondering, Poletti, I know the transport seems like the number one issue from supporters, but if we want to talk about boutique stadiums and getting, close to sellouts in, A-League games outside of derbies, then Leichhardt seems like something that is definitely worth considering.
Yes and no. I think you can't discount the fact that there is no parking around the stadium. It's all local street parking. Most of it's at least 1.5 kilometres away. Even then, a lot of it is still signage of during events, 1 hour parking only unless you have a permit. All that street parking fills up very quickly, even for the A-League women's games. You can get there via light rail, or as you two would call it, a tram. We have the light rail here in New South Wales. There are buses that run to the top of the street, but you're not going to get 15,000 people, 20,000 people transported to a stadium by light rail and buses and have it actually be successful week in, week out.
How do the West Tigers do it then, just out of interest?
They parachute everyone in.
Okay, they don't play that many games.
They have 3 home grounds. They have Campbelltown Stadium, they have Leichhardt Oval, and they have the Western Sydney Stadium in Parramatta, where the Wanderers play out of. So yeah, it's 4 games a year at best. I think so. The transport issue is one thing, and then I think the other thing is that for Sydney FC, you get more people to the fixtures at the Sydney Football Stadium than you do for the equivalent fixtures at Leichhardt Oval. You can't discredit, particularly when everyone's strapped for cash around the league at the moment. What those few extra thousand in ticket sales do.
But also the rent on the stadium, does that cancel out?
I think they have. I wouldn't say it's a favourable agreement, but I know they are locked into a long-term deal with the Sydney Football Stadium as well. Because I think this question was also brought up while it was being knocked down. As like, well, do they have to go back? And the answer is yes. They have a stadium agreement with the SCG Trust. And I think the idea of having a singular home ground can't be understated for a team like Sydney FC, knowing that, or just for any team in the league, having a singular home ground. I don't think that idea can be understated. You don't want it to be, well, where do we have to go this week? Do we have to go to Leichhardt? I don't really feel like it, so I'm not going to go this week. Whereas if it was at the Sydney Football Stadium, I wouldn't. I think, those confusions do. I know that when they were on their little on their sabbatical from the SFS, that I'd quite often look at the schedule and be like, I actually don't know where the game is tomorrow, and I had to look it up. Like, I think you run into that sort of situation more and more. I like the capacity idea, but I think there's enough negatives there. That and the fact you look at the fact that this thing wouldn't be ready until 2028, I believe it was, based on the article. So you're still looking at least another 3 years away. I haven't read too much of the article. I don't know what sort of the renovations are going to be, but the corporate facilities already aren't great. I think it needs a lot more than $40 million put into it, because if all they're doing is renovating the main stand and putting...
I think it's pretty
colourful
holistic, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, I can't imagine you're going to get it to 2025 stadium standards with $40 million, in terms of corporate facilities, in terms of everything like that. It is a ground I enjoy going to, don't get me wrong, but yeah, it is an absolute pain. I think it needs a lot more work put into it. And so I'm not sold on the idea of it being the home for Sydney FC. And I mean, we already saw this season already that there were a number of A-League women games plus Unite round that had to be moved away from Leichhardt Oval because of the state of the pitch. That's with the West Tigers not having played there for months. I know there was, the New South Wales Rugby League uses it a lot. I know local rugby union uses it a lot. And so I think, why wouldn't you just want to go to the stadium where, at least it's only the top flight competitions you have to deal with, as opposed to the state league competitions in another, in two other codes, plus the fact that RPA Leichhardt are set to use it for the Australian Championship as well. So that's another tenant in summer, assuming that you don't get that home and away championship season over winter, that you have to organise and schedule around as well. I think that the negatives just outweigh the positives here.
Fair enough. I think perhaps a criticism of Australian infrastructure planning as a whole there with the regards to transport and public transport accessibility and stuff like that, because it seems like it pops up with just about any development project that springs up in this country. We're going to finish off though with it's a Friday episode for us, so we'd be remiss not to touch on some Asian football. Champions League Elite now. Lockie pointed out that I made that mistake in the intro, and that's because, yes, I'm very tired, but my mind immediately went to Bailey Wright, who of course is playing in the ACL 2 final. I got a mix up there. I thought that was the Champions League Elite. That's my bad, but of course, it's Paddy Kisnorbo is set to go up against Cristiano Ronaldo. The first round of the Champions League Elite finals starts on Sunday morning. It's obviously this new format, Lockie, with the centralised Final 8, and it's being held in Saudi Arabia. Of course, Patrick Kisnorbo, you're probably thinking, isn't he the assistant coach? That's where you're wrong.
Got him.
Steve Holland he's been ousted from Yokohama F. Marinos. I don't want to be that guy, but I'm pretty sure I called it when we announced that Patrick Kisnorbo was heading over there. I said, there's no way he doesn't have a gut feeling that Holland isn't going to last long and that he'll have the job soon. Seems like that's come true, and it seems like Steve Holland is again out of a position at a football team. I have my own feelings about him, which I'll leave for another day. But they've not been in good form themselves in the league domestically. They're sitting right at the bottom of the table in J1. So Lockie, it's a stern test for them to come up against Al Nassr and Cristiano Ronaldo. But it's a nice little moment for Australian football that perhaps it's an Australian coach that's gonna be a test for one of the great footballers of our generation.
Those TikToks or Instagram reels where it's like just a collation of like movie stars like in movie clips doing like the kind of head nod down, like the acknowledgement. It's like, well done. It felt like there was a lot of that towards Patrick Kisnorbo for this move. It's like, I don't love what you've done there, but I respect
it.
the move.
Yeah,
you've clearly seen the opportunity. You've seen the writing on the wall. A new coach. Yokohama are contractually not allowed to have a non-Australian as a head coach for more than 6 months. So one had to come around.
They made a deal with the
sooner
devil
rather than
somewhere.
later. Exactly. Skippy the Kangaroo signed it on 10 years ago or something like that. But he's done well. I still have a lot of criticism of the way he went about his Melbourne Victory tenure, but he's found himself in a very powerful footballing position over at Yokohama. Unfortunately, he's got a hell of a job to do. They're sitting at the bottom of the J1 table at the moment. They're a legitimate relegation threat after about 12 or 13 games, so not an insignificant portion of their season. And they just lost on the weekend, conceding one of the most ridiculous throw-in routines you've ever seen. And now they have to go play Cristiano Ronaldo in the Champions League elites. Obviously, this is kind of the situation that Australian clubs used to have to deal with, where you kind of qualify for the league, and not only do you have to wait 12 months for the next season to happen to start it, but then because the seasons are off kilter, you have to wait another 6 months. That's now a Japanese and a Korean issue. So they're kind of so far away from the team that they were when they qualified for this Champions League elite. They are now a low down J1 team, and they did well just to get this far. So they're in the final 8. You guys don't really have to come back at me on this. I just thought it would be fun for some of our listeners to enjoy the Asian football part. But yeah, Cristiano Ronaldo's Al Nassr up against Yokohama on Sunday morning. It's a pretty cool game. Honestly, I have no clue how you watch it. I won't be getting up in the morning. I'm not that interested in this game of football, but I'll be paying attention to the results.
I assume it would be on Paramount Plus. I believe they have the rights to all Champions League elite games.
That is my best guess as well, but it's a situation where the AFC have separate control over this final 8. So I was just leaving myself a little bit of wiggle room in
whether
case
or not they actually bothered to show this
separately.
game. Yeah,
or even just sell it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Just before we do sign off, the idea behind sacking Steve Holland because they've had the poor start to the J League season. I'm just having a look at their schedule here in terms of the results they've played. They have been playing every 3 days basically since February because of this centralized hub where they had to get games in because of Champions League elite games. Like literally, like the season started with a 1-0 win in the Champions League elite on Wednesday, February 12th, and then it's literally 3 days, 3 days, 4 days, 3 days, 3 days, 3 days, like all the way through till Sunday when they lost 3-1 to Red Diamonds with that crazy throw-in routine that was literally PK League in Japan. I don't. It's completely understandable why they would be bottom of the table, because when you're playing every 3 days, you just don't get a chance to fix any mistakes that have been popping up in your game. It's play, recover, rest, play. There's no time for training to work on things. So I not the biggest fan of Kisnorbo as a coach, but I think once the fixturing starts to slow down, which I believe comes in at the end of May, because they've still got games to catch up on while they're away in this hub, so they'll have a chance to slow down then.
As a counterpoint to this notion of fixture congestion, Poletti, in the words of Ufuk himself, that's modern football for you. So, teams and coaches aren't unaware that they're going to be facing those sorts of things, especially when they qualify for continental football. Yes, it's fair enough that it's going to take a toll, but also they knew in advance that this was going to be the case, and they had time to prepare for it. So, I think it just goes to show, like Lockie said, they've come a long way since they qualified, but not necessarily in an upwards trajectory. But that will do for this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. A little bit of a change to routine with the three of us, but Lockie not hosting, me hosting instead, me messing up an intro. That's a very Lockie thing to do, to be fair. Although you guys
don't hear that though.
They don't hear that because you do cut it out and redo it, and it wastes.
Well, when he remembers to cut it out anyway.
Yeah. We usually waste about 5 minutes at the start of every podcast recording because he has to re-record himself doing it all
right,
from
no,
the
it's
start.
not that bad.
No, he's not. But it's been good fun nonetheless. Obviously, lots to talk about, and I'm sure we'll have lots to talk about on our next episode, which will be coming in. What a week! This is the Friday episode, so it'll be on the Tuesday.
Yeah, see, it's hard, isn't it?
It is difficult, especially with back-to-back long weekends. I'm completely lost as to what day it even is at the moment. But
It's Thursday.
Yeah, it is Thursday. Yeah, a massive thank you to my two guests this evening. Poletti, thank you.
Thank you.
And Lockie for making the effort to come in, even though you're not feeling 100%. Really appreciate it, mate.
Yeah, thanks, Skipper. Good shift, mate.
Thank you very much. As I said, we'll be back on Tuesday with our summary of all the crazy A-League action that will happen over the weekend. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.